1 year ago, someone on Reddit asked if Mordhau will ever come to console. The response from the community manager? We have to see how well Mordhau does on PC first. If we have the resources and the demand for console ports post-release, we'll definitely look into it. A console release for Mordhau will definitely be welcomed by a lot of gamers around the world. The console gaming market is huge, in fact even bigger than the PC gaming market. Unfortunately for all the console gamers out there, nothing within the last year has indicated that such a console release is in the works or even planned. Yet I was curious if Mordhau would actually be worth playing on a controller, so I dug out my trusty old Xbox 360 controller and gave it a shot. First of all, I needed to come up with a good, intuitive control scheme. The main requirement was to create a setup that allowed my left thumb to stay on the left joystick to control the player movement, and my right thumb to stay on the right stick to control the camera. So the most important actions had to go on the trigger and bumper buttons that I can press freely with my middle and index fingers, while my thumbs do the movement and camera work. Setting up my Xbox controller for Mordhau worked without any major hiccups. The only thing I had to do was to go into Steam's Big Picture mode and set keyboard keys to the trigger and bumper buttons, and then set the same keyboard keys to actions in the game itself. I also changed the mode for the left joystick to an 8-way D-pad and assigned a keyboard key to every direction. This way I could make it so my character sprints permanently while moving forward, which isn't 100% ideal, but frees up one of the easy accessible buttons. Now to the actual controls. I choose the left bumper for feint or parry and the right bumper for right horizontal strike, my main attack. Left trigger for right underhand and right trigger for right overhead. Stab on right joystick press and switch attack side via camera movement. I bound the actions jump, kick, crouch and use to the 4 buttons to the right. I set fire, which is needed for using a bandage, to the same button as use. Furthermore, I used 3 of the D-pad directions for inventory slots and bound the 4th D-pad button to spacebar, which is required to respawn after a death. Moving forward and sprint are both bound to the same key and make my character sprint by default. I set a secondary binding for walking forward to the back button, so I can also move forward without sprinting, which is useful for triggering the passive healing while moving. The start button is set to primary spectator action, which is also required to respawn after a death. Alright then, controller plugged in, control scheme set, ready to fight. The first few rounds felt pretty bad honestly, which was to be expected. I couldn't look around comfortably, nor hit where I wanted to hit. I couldn't chamber properly and often pressed the wrong buttons in the heat of the moment. I was reminded how much muscle memory there is involved in seemingly the simplest things. After playing a few hours, however, I started to get used to the controls. I was slowly but surely at a point where I could see that leaning back on a couch with a controller, putting my feet up and playing around a frontline or invasion could be a fun experience. Maybe it was the new challenge that got me hyped up. I caught myself smiling all over the face when I won my first duel encounter in a frontline match. That was a really nice kill, I thought to myself. Of course, one can't expect to win a duel tournament with a controller, but you actually don't need to be the best player in the world to have fun and do reasonably well in frontline and invasion. Most of the disadvantages a controller has over mouse and keyboard are associated with the camera control via the right joystick. If you compare the range of motion of a mousepad with the few centimeters of a controller joystick, it is apparent that a mouse will always make it easier to be precise and consistent. In Mordhau, smooth camera work is crucial, especially if you want to beat good players. Another problem is the camera speed. You need to find a middle ground between fast enough to be able to make rapid turns and not too fast to be able to aim your attacks precisely. With a mouse, You can just move your arm faster or slower. With a controller, however, if you make the camera fast enough to be able to turn around immediately, even the tiniest movement will move the camera a huge distance and you can't be precise anymore. I played around with the camera sensitivity quite a bit and settled for 3.0 for the horizontal axis and 0.75 for the vertical axis. Looking up and down doesn't have to be as fast as looking left and right. As already mentioned, looking left and right has to be reasonably fast to make rapid turns possible. Like for example, when you need to parry someone from the left and then immediately after someone from the right. This is not something that is new. Pretty much everyone knows that mouse keyboard has a competitive advantage over a controller in a game where precise camera work is key. That's why there is aim assist for controller players in games like Fortnite and Call of Duty. Other games don't even have crossplay because it would be too hard for controller players to compete. Beside the clunky camera control, however, the game feels fairly well to play on a controller. If you stick to one loadout, you can play a full game of Frontline or Invasion from start to finish without touching your mouse or keyboard even once. As for playstyle differences between mouse, keyboard and controller, I found that longer weapons actually suit the controller a little bit better. The closer you stand to your opponents, the more you need to move your camera. One might think that a full 240 control scheme might be the best input method because of the limited buttons a controller has to offer. Inputting the attack angle and doing the camera work, however, is in my opinion too clumsy for the joystick. At the time of uploading this video, I played around 6 to 7 hours of Mordhau with my controller, and for someone like me that has many more hours with mouse and keyboard, the two input systems lie worlds apart. I bet, however, that players that are more used to controllers than me and have less experience in the game won't feel that much of a difference if they use a proper controller input layout. So to sum up my thoughts, I think that playing Mordhau casually can definitely be enjoyable on a controller. As for higher skill level duels and competitive play, however, mouse and keyboard players will always have an advantage. Yet I think that Mordhau could do fairly well on console, since the vast majority of the player base plays this game casually. Chivalry 2 will come out in 2021 with full crossplay between PlayStation, Xbox and PC. And even though the game seems to go a bit more of a casual approach, I'm eager to see how well it does on console. Alright guys, that's it for this controller experiment. Please let me know in the comment section what you think about console releases, crossplay and melee slashers on controllers. If you liked this video, then please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to this channel if you want to see more Mordhau content in the future. As always, thank you all for watching and see you soon.